The sun was beginning to set as Tanya Williams pulled her car into the parking lot of Quick Stop convenience store. After 14 hours on duty as the county sheriff, all she wanted was to grab a few essentials and head home. She hadn't had time to change out of her casual clothes, a pair of dark jeans and a navy blue sweater, which she often wore under her uniform jacket during cooler months. Her badge and ID were tucked safely in her pocket, as they always were when she was off the clock but still technically on call. The store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Tanya pushed through the glass doors. The cool air inside was a welcome relief after the stuffiness of her car. Mrs. Chen, the store owner, gave her a friendly nod from behind the counter. They knew each other well. Tanya made it a point to know all the local business owners in her jurisdiction. "Long day?" Mrs. Chen asked, noting the tiredness in Tanya's eyes. "The longest," Tanya replied with a small smile. "Just need to grab a few things before heading home." She grabbed a small basket and moved through the aisles, picking up milk, bread, and a frozen dinner. Not the healthiest option, but cooking was the last thing on her mind tonight. She also grabbed a pint of chocolate ice cream, her weakness after particularly stressful days. As she was examining the expiration date on a carton of eggs, the store's bell chimed, signaling another customer. Tanya barely looked up, focused on her shopping, but something made her glance toward the entrance. A police officer had walked in, Officer Mike Randall from the city police department. Their jurisdictions overlapped sometimes, though they rarely worked together directly. Tanya had heard mixed things about him from other officers. She returned her attention to the eggs, deciding they were fresh enough, and added them to her basket. As she moved to the next aisle for some coffee, she felt eyes on her. Glancing up, she caught Officer Randall watching her intently. He quickly averted his gaze, pretending to be interested in the energy drinks nearby. Tanya frowned slightly but continued shopping. It wasn't unusual for police to be vigilant in stores, especially during evening hours when robberies were more common. Still, something about his attention felt different, more targeted. As she moved to the freezer section for her ice cream, she noticed him shifting positions to keep her in his line of sight. Now it was obvious he was watching her specifically. Tanya felt a familiar tension creep into her shoulders, a feeling she had experienced many times before becoming sheriff, and sadly, even afterward. She straightened her back and continued shopping normally, though now she was acutely aware of his presence. Years of experience had taught her to stay calm in uncomfortable situations. As the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county, she had dealt with plenty of prejudice from those who didn't think she belonged in her position. At the counter, Mrs. Chen rang up her items. "That will be $27.65, she said, bagging the groceries efficiently. Tanya pulled out her wallet and handed over her credit card. As Mrs. Chen processed the payment, Tanya felt Officer Randall's presence behind her, still watching. She signed the receipt, thanked Mrs. Chen, and took her bags. "Have a good night, Mrs. Chen," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume to be professional but not confrontational. "You too, Sheriff," Mrs. Chen replied naturally, without thinking. Tanya saw Officer Randall's eyebrows raise at the title. She turned and walked out of the store, hoping that would be the end of it. The parking lot was mostly empty now, with just her car and a couple others, including the patrol car that Officer Randall had arrived in. The evening air had cooled considerably, and Tanya walked briskly to her car, grocery bags in hand. She had just reached her vehicle and was fishing her keys from her pocket when she heard footsteps approaching from behind. "Excuse me, ma'am?" The formal address, tinged with a hint of suspicion, made Tanya take a deep breath before turning around. Officer Randall stood there, his posture stiff and his hand resting casually near his belt. "Yes, officer," she responded, her voice level and professional. "Mind if I see your receipt?" he asked, though it sounded more like a demand than a question. Tanya paused, noting how he was only approaching her despite another customer, a young white man, exiting the store just behind her without being stopped. "May I ask why?" she questioned calmly. Officer Randall's expression hardened. "Store security. We've had some issues with shoplifting in this area recently." Tanya knew this wasn't true. As sheriff, she received all the local crime reports, and this store hadn't reported any theft issues in months. Furthermore, random receipt checks weren't standard procedure for city police. "I understand," she said carefully, "but I paid for all my items and the store owner knows me well." "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see that receipt, he repeated, his tone growing firmer. Unless you have something to hide. A couple walking to their car slowed down, watching the interaction with curious eyes. Tanya was painfully aware of how this scene might look to others, and how quickly things could escalate if she wasn't careful. I don't have anything to hide, officer, she replied. I'm just curious why I'm being singled out when others are leaving the store without being questioned. Officer Randall stepped closer, his body language becoming more aggressive. Look, I'm not going to ask again. Show me the receipt or we're going to have a problem. The couple watching had now stopped completely, the woman pulling out her phone discreetly. Tanya noticed this from the corner of her eye and felt both grateful for the witnesses and frustrated that this situation was happening at all. Officer Randall, she said, now using his name deliberately. I'm simply asking for clarification on why I'm being stopped. His eyes narrowed at her use of his name. How do you know my name? I make it a point to know the officers who work in and around my jurisdiction, she replied evenly. Your jurisdiction? He scoffed, clearly not believing her. Let me see some ID then. Tanya considered her options carefully. She could reveal her identity now and potentially embarrass him, which might make the situation worse before it got better. Or she could comply with his demand to see the receipt, which felt like giving in to profiling. Neither option sat well with her, but as sheriff, she also had a responsibility to model proper interaction with law enforcement. I'll show you both my receipt and my ID, she said finally, setting her grocery bags down by her car. She reached slowly into her pocket for her wallet, noting how Officer Randall tensed at her movement. As she pulled out the receipt from her wallet, a small business card fell out onto the ground. Officer Randall glanced down at it, and Tanya saw his expression change as he read the gold-embossed letters. Sheriff Tanya Williams, County Sheriff's Department. She handed him the receipt, maintaining eye contact. Here's the receipt you asked for, Officer Randall. Would you like to see my badge and ID as well? His face registered confusion, then the first flickers of realization. The couple watching had moved closer now, the woman's phone definitely recording. Another car had pulled into the lot, its headlights illuminating the scene briefly before parking. You're claiming to be the sheriff? Officer Randall asked, his voice betraying a mix of disbelief and the first hint of concern. I'm not claiming anything, Tanya replied calmly. I am Sheriff Williams. Now would you like to tell me the real reason you singled me out in that store and followed me to the parking lot? The air between them grew thick with tension. In the distance, the sound of another car approaching broke the silence. Officer Randall glanced nervously at the gathering audience, then back at Tanya. The reality of his situation slowly dawning on his face as the evening took an unexpected turn. Officer Randall shifted his weight from one foot to the other, visibly uncomfortable as he processed what Tanya had just revealed. His eyes darted to the business card on the ground, then back to her face. For a moment, it seemed like he might back down, but then his expression hardened again. Anyone can get a card printed, he said dismissively. I'm going to need to see that official ID. Tanya nodded slowly. Of course. She reached carefully into her pocket again, conscious of his watchful eyes. The couple who had been observing was now joined by another shopper exiting the store. Tanya could hear hushed whispers as they watched the scene unfold. She pulled out her official Sheriff's Department ID and badge holder, holding it up so Officer Randall could clearly see it. This is my official identification, Officer Randall. As you can see, I am Sheriff Tanya Williams. Officer Randall leaned forward, examining the ID with narrowed eyes. His jaw tightened as he realized she was indeed telling the truth. But instead of apologizing or standing down, he seemed to double down. Well, Sheriff, he said, putting an odd emphasis on her title, that doesn't explain why you were acting suspiciously in the store. Tanya blinked in genuine confusion. Acting suspiciously? I was grocery shopping after a 14-hour shift. You were moving between aisles quickly, looking around constantly, he countered, raising his voice slightly. Classic signs of someone planning to steal. The absurdity of the accusation might have made Tanya laugh if the situation weren't so serious. She was acutely aware of the growing audience around them, including the woman still recording with her phone. Officer Randall, I was simply trying to finish my shopping efficiently because I'm tired after a long day, Tanya explained patiently, just like any other shopper might do. Then you won't mind if I check your bags, he said, reaching for her groceries. Tanya stepped between him and her bags. Actually, I do mind. You have no probable cause and you've seen my receipt. This stops now. Officer Randall's face flushed red. Look, I'm just doing my job. People like you always think you're above the rules. The comment hung in the air, its implication crystal clear to everyone listening. Several gasps came from the small crowd that had gathered. People like me? Tanya repeated, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. What exactly do you mean by that, Officer Randall? He faltered momentarily, realizing his mistake too late. I meant, people who think their position puts them above the law. Is that really what you meant? Tanya challenged him. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you targeted me the moment I walked into that store. Long before you knew I was the sheriff. I was responding to suspicious behavior, he insisted, though his argument was weakening. What's going on here? A new voice called out. An older man approached from a recently parked car. Tanya recognized him as Tom Peters, a retired judge who lived nearby. Officer Randall straightened his posture. Just a routine check, sir. Nothing to worry about. Doesn't look routine to me, Judge Peters remarked, looking between them. Evening, Sheriff Williams. Everything all right? Judge Peters, Tanya acknowledged with a nod. Officer Randall here was just explaining why he singled me out for a receipt check after I left the store. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Is that so? He turned to Officer Randall. Young man, do you regularly check receipts in store parking lots? Officer Randall's confidence was visibly crumbling. We've had reports of shoplifting in this area. That's interesting, Tanya said, crossing her arms. Because as sheriff, I receive all local crime reports, and there haven't been any theft issues reported at this store in months. And even if there were, why stop me and not the other customers who just left? The crowd had grown to about 8 people now, with more watching from their cars. Mrs. Chen had even stepped outside her store to see what was happening. Officer Randall's radio crackled to life, making him jump slightly. He reached for it, perhaps grateful for the distraction. Dispatch to Unit 47, what's your status? He cleared his throat before responding. Unit 47 here. All clear at Quick Stop. Tanya raised an eyebrow. All clear? I think your dispatch might want to know you're currently detaining the county sheriff without cause. The radio crackled again. Unit 47, we're getting calls about a disturbance in the Quick Stop parking lot. Can you confirm? Officer Randall looked around at the gathering crowd, realization dawning that this situation was spiraling out of his control. Negative, dispatch. Just wrapping up a misunderstanding, clearing the scene shortly. Too late for that, Judge Peters commented. Looks like you've created quite a scene here. Tanya picked up her grocery bags, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Officer Randall, I understand you were just doing your job, but I think we both know what really happened here. You saw a black woman shopping alone at night and made assumptions. You didn't see a sheriff. You didn't even see a person deserving of basic respect. Officer Randall's face contorted with a mixture of emotions, anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been fear. That's not what happened. I was responding to suspicious behavior. Then please explain to all these witnesses exactly what suspicious behavior you observed, Tanya challenged him. Because I've been in law enforcement for 15 years and I know what profiling looks like. The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Randall opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to formulate a response that wouldn't further incriminate him. The woman who had been recording stepped forward. I got everything on video, Sheriff. From the moment he approached you. Thank you, Tanya said sincerely. I may need that later. Officer Randall's radio came to life once more. Unit 47, Lieutenant Walsh is requesting your status. Please respond. Tanya recognized the name. Lieutenant Walsh was Randall's direct supervisor in the city police department. Word was traveling fast. Officer Randall swallowed hard. I need to respond to my superior, he said, his voice now lacking its earlier authority. By all means, Tanya replied, gesturing to his radio. And while you're at it, you can inform Lieutenant Walsh that I'll be filing a formal complaint about this incident first thing in the morning. As Officer Randall stepped away to speak into his radio, Judge Peters moved closer to Tanya. You okay? He asked quietly. I'm fine, she assured him, though her hands were shaking slightly as she adjusted her grip on the grocery bags. Just didn't expect to be profiled and harassed after a long day's work. It never gets easier, does it? The judge said sympathetically. At 72, he had seen decades of this behavior throughout his career. No, it doesn't. Tanya agreed. But at least now I'm in a position to do something about it. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Someone must have called 911 rather than just the non-emergency line. This was rapidly becoming a much bigger incident than Officer Randall had anticipated when he decided to follow Tanya out of the store. Officer Randall returned, his face now pale. "Lieutenant Walsh is on his way," he said stiffly. "He's requested that you remain on scene, Sheriff." "I was planning to," Tanya replied. "This needs to be addressed properly." More people had gathered now, some taking photos or videos with their phones. Mrs. Chen approached cautiously. "Sheriff Williams, I'm so sorry this happened," she said. "He came in right after you and started watching you right away. I didn't like it, but I didn't know what to do." "It's not your fault, Mrs. Chen," Tanya assured her. "You didn't do anything wrong." 2 patrol cars pulled into the parking lot, their lights flashing but sirens now silent. Lieutenant Walsh, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, stepped out of the first car and surveyed the scene with a grim expression. He spotted Tanya immediately and approached her, pointedly ignoring Officer Randall for the moment. "Sheriff Williams," he said, extending his hand, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Likewise." "Lieutenant," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I've been briefed by dispatch, but I'd like to hear what happened directly from you," he said, pulling out a notepad. Tanya nodded and began recounting the events of the evening. From the moment she entered the store to Officer Randall's confrontation in the parking lot. As she spoke, she noticed Officer Randall standing rigidly to the side, his face a mask of barely contained emotion as the consequences of his actions began to unfold before him. The night air had grown chilly, but Tanya barely noticed. Her ice cream was melting in one of the bags, but that was the least of her concerns right now. As she finished explaining the situation to Lieutenant Walsh, she looked directly at Officer Randall, their eyes meeting across the parking lot. In that moment, she made a decision. This wouldn't just be about punishing one officer. This would be about making real change in how both departments operated. Because no one, sheriff or civilian, should ever have to experience what she had just gone through. Lieutenant Walsh finished taking notes as Tanya completed her account of the events. The parking lot had become an impromptu gathering place, with at least 15 onlookers now watching the scene unfold. The flashing lights from the patrol cars painted everything in alternating blues and reds, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. "I'll need statements from witnesses as well," Lieutenant Walsh said, looking around at the crowd. Several people immediately stepped forward, including the woman who had been recording and Judge Peters. Officer Randall stood to the side, his face frozen in a mask of growing horror as he realized just how badly he had misjudged the situation. What he had thought would be a routine stop, perhaps even an opportunity to show his authority, had transformed into a nightmare that could very well end his career. "Sheriff Williams, if you don't mind waiting a bit longer, I need to have a word with Officer Randall," Lieutenant Walsh said, his tone professional but with an unmistakable edge of anger. "Of course," Tanya replied. She set her grocery bags down on the hood of her car and watched as Lieutenant Walsh led Officer Randall several feet away for what appeared to be an intense conversation. Mrs. Chen approached Tanya again, this time with a small cooler in hand. "For your ice cream," she explained, gesturing to Tanya's grocery bags, "so it doesn't melt while you wait." The simple act of kindness almost broke through Tanya's professional composure. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That's very thoughtful." As Tanya transferred her frozen items to the cooler, she overheard snippets of Lieutenant Walsh's conversation with Officer Randall. Completely unacceptable behavior. "Do you have any idea how serious this is? Racial profiling allegations alone, officer?" Randall's responses were too quiet to hear, but his body language spoke volumes. Shoulders hunched, head occasionally nodding or shaking, hands alternately gesturing in defense or hanging limply at his sides. One of the other officers who had arrived with Lieutenant Walsh was now collecting contact information from witnesses. The crowd had begun to thin slightly, but many remained, seemingly invested in seeing how this would play out. Judge Peters returned to Tanya's side after giving his statement. "This isn't going away quietly," he observed. "Too many witnesses, too much evidence. Your position as sheriff just makes it all the more visible." Tanya nodded. "Good, it shouldn't go away quietly. This happens every day to people who don't have a badge to protect them. The judge's weathered face creased in a sad smile. Badge didn't protect you from being profiled in the first place, though, did it? No, Tanya acknowledged. It didn't. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, its headlights momentarily blinding as it turned toward the gathered crowd. Tanya recognized it immediately. The vehicle belonged to Commissioner Howard, the head of the police commission that oversaw both the city police department and the county sheriff's department. Someone had called in the big guns. Well, well, Judge Peters murmured. Looks like word travels fast in this county. Commissioner Howard stepped out of his vehicle, his imposing figure immediately drawing attention. At 65, he still maintained the physique and presence of the Marine he had once been. His close-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes missed nothing as he surveyed the scene. Lieutenant Walsh straightened immediately, leaving Officer Randall to approach the commissioner. They spoke briefly, with Walsh gesturing toward Tanya and then Officer Randall. Commissioner Howard nodded, his expression growing increasingly grave. He approached Tanya first, extending his hand. Sheriff Williams, I was at home when I got the call. This is highly unusual. That's one way of putting it, Tanya replied, shaking his hand firmly. I'd like to hear your version of events, if you don't mind, the commissioner said. Tanya recounted the story for the third time that evening, keeping her tone professional despite her frustration at having to repeatedly explain why she had been shopping while black. As she finished, Commissioner Howard nodded slowly. I see. And Officer Randall knew you were the sheriff when he insisted on searching your bags? Yes, I had already shown him my badge and ID at that point. The commissioner's eyebrows shot up. I see, he repeated, though his tone suggested he was now seeing something entirely different and deeply troubling. He turned toward Officer Randall, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. Officer Randall, my office tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Lieutenant Walsh will escort you back to the station now to complete your incident report. I expect it to be thorough and honest. Officer Randall nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. Your body camera, the commissioner continued. Was it operational during this encounter? Officer Randall swallowed visibly. Yes, sir. It was activated when I exited my vehicle to approach Sheriff Williams. Good. That footage will be reviewed as part of this investigation, Commissioner Howard stated firmly. Lieutenant, please ensure that footage is secured immediately. Already requested it. Sir, Lieutenant Walsh confirmed. The commissioner turned back to Tanya. Sheriff Williams, I apologize for what you've experienced this evening. This is not representative of what we expect from our officers, and there will be a full investigation. I'll need you to come in tomorrow as well to file a formal complaint. I'll be there, Tanya assured him. And, Commissioner, I don't want this to just be about one officer. This needs to address the larger issues at play. The commissioner held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. We have work to do, and perhaps this incident, unfortunate as it is, will provide the catalyst we need for meaningful change. By now, several news vans had pulled into the parking lot. Local reporters, alerted by the police scanner chatter or possibly by bystanders on social media, had arrived to cover the unfolding story. Cameras were being set up and reporters were already approaching witnesses for comments. The media's here, Judge Peters observed unnecessarily. This will be all over the news by morning, Tanya sighed. She had never sought the spotlight, preferring to do her work quietly and effectively. But perhaps this was exactly what was needed, public attention on an issue that too often remained in the shadows. Sheriff Williams called one of the reporters, a young woman with a microphone and a cameraman in tow. Can you tell us what happened here tonight? Before Tanya could respond, Commissioner Howard stepped in. There will be a press conference tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at police headquarters. Until then, we have no comment as this is an ongoing investigation. The reporter looked disappointed but backed away, turning her attention to some of the bystanders instead. You should go home. Sheriff, Commissioner Howard said quietly, it's been a long day and tomorrow will be even longer. Tanya nodded gratefully. Thank you, Commissioner. As Lieutenant Walsh led Officer Randall to one of the patrol cars, their eyes met briefly. The anger in Officer Randall's gaze had been replaced by something else. Fear, perhaps. Or maybe the first glimmer of understanding about the consequences of his actions. Tanya gathered her groceries, including the cooler Mrs. Chen had provided, and placed them in her car. The crowd was slowly dispersing now that the immediate confrontation had ended, though several people approached her to offer words of support before leaving. You handled that with grace, Judge Peters told her as she prepared to leave. Not everyone would have been so composed. Years of practice, Tanya replied with a tired smile. Though I never expected to need those skills as sheriff. The title doesn't change how some people see us, the judge said sagely. But it does give us the power to change the system. Use it well. I intend to, Tanya promised, getting into her car. As she drove away, she caught a glimpse of Officer Randall in her rearview mirror, sitting in the back of Lieutenant Walsh's patrol car. His head was bowed, his career and reputation now hanging by a thread. The consequences of his actions were only just beginning to unfold. Tanya felt no satisfaction in his downfall. This wasn't about punishing one officer. It was about addressing a systemic problem. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, media attention, and the beginning of what she hoped would be meaningful change. But for tonight, she just wanted to go home, put her groceries away, and perhaps salvage what remained of her ice cream. Her phone buzzed with a message from her deputy. Saw the news alert. You okay? Need backup? Tanya smiled slightly. Word really did travel fast. I'm fine, she texted back. But tomorrow we have work to do. As she pulled onto the main road, she took a deep breath, already mentally preparing for the battles ahead. What had started as a simple trip to the grocery store had become something much bigger, a chance to challenge the very biases she had fought against her entire career. And this time she had the authority, the witnesses, and the evidence to make it count. Tanya barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the confrontation in the parking lot, the suspicion in Officer Randall's eyes, the humiliation of being treated like a criminal, the gathering crowd of witnesses. By the time her alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., she had already been awake for an hour, mentally preparing for the day ahead. She dressed with particular care, choosing her formal sheriff's uniform with all the official insignia and badges of office. Today was not a day for civilian clothes or casual attire. Today she needed to visibly embody the authority of her position. As she sipped her coffee and scrolled through her phone, she wasn't surprised to see that the incident had already made headlines. County sheriff racially profiled and detained by city police officer. Several local news outlets had picked up the story, and it was spreading quickly on social media. Someone had uploaded video footage of part of the confrontation, which already had thousands of views and comments. Her phone rang. It was Deputy Chief Rodriguez, her second in command. Morning. Chief, she answered. Morning, Sheriff. Just checking in before the storm hits. You doing okay? Tanya appreciated his concern. I'm fine, Alex. Not my first rodeo with this kind of thing. Yeah, but it's the first time since you've been sheriff. The optics on this are significant. I know, she replied. I'm headed to the commissioner's office at 8 for the formal complaint. Then there's a press conference at 9. Can you hold down the fort this morning? Absolutely, Rodriguez assured her. The whole department's behind you, Sheriff. What happened was wrong on every level. His support meant more than he knew. Thanks, Alex. I'll keep you updated. By 7:30, Tanya was pulling into the parking lot of the police commission headquarters. Several news vans were already stationed outside, reporters sipping coffee as they waited for the press conference later that morning. Tanya managed to slip in through a side entrance, avoiding the cameras for now. Commissioner Howard was waiting for her in the lobby. Sheriff Williams, thank you for coming in early. I thought you might want to avoid the media circus for now. Appreciated, Tanya said, shaking his hand. They walked together to a conference room where Lieutenant Walsh was already waiting, along with a woman Tanya recognized as Diane Patel, head of internal affairs. Officer Randall will be here at 8, Commissioner Howard explained. We'll take your statement first, then his. Separately, of course. The next hour was spent giving a detailed account of the previous night's events. Tanya was methodical, sticking to the facts without editorializing. She had been in law enforcement long enough to know that the facts alone were damning. They didn't need emotional language to make their point. The body camera footage confirms your account, Lieutenant Walsh said when she had finished. We've reviewed it this morning. It's not good for Officer Randall. What happens now? Tanya asked. Officer Randall is being placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending a full investigation, Commissioner Howard stated. But given the evidence and witness statements, I don't think that investigation will take long. The real question is what disciplinary action will follow, Diane Patel spoke up. There are several options on the table, ranging from mandatory sensitivity training and probation to termination. The police commission will make the final determination. I don't necessarily want to see him fired, Tanya said, surprising them. What I want is real change. One officer losing his job won't fix the systemic issues at play here. Commissioner Howard leaned forward, clearly interested. What do you have in mind, Sheriff? Comprehensive anti-bias training for both departments. Regular community engagement initiatives. A civilian oversight committee with actual teeth. Transparent reporting of stop-and-search statistics broken down by race and gender. Tanya listed. And that's just for starters. The room was silent for a moment as they absorbed her words. That's ambitious, Lieutenant Walsh said finally. It's necessary, Tanya countered. And this incident gives us the platform and public attention to make it happen. I'm not interested in burning Officer Randall at the stake as a scapegoat while the underlying problems remain unaddressed. Commissioner Howard studied her thoughtfully. You've given this some consideration. I've had my whole career to think about it, Tanya replied simply. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. A secretary poked her head in. Officer Randall has arrived, sir. Thank you. Please show him to the other conference room, the commissioner directed. To Tanya, he added, we'll continue this discussion after the press conference. I think your ideas have merit, Sheriff Williams. As Tanya left the conference room, she caught a glimpse of Officer Randall being led down the hallway. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His uniform was impeccable, but his eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn. When he saw her, he quickly looked away, unable to meet her gaze. By 9 a.m., the press conference room was packed with reporters and cameras. Tanya stood to the right of Commissioner Howard at the podium, with Lieutenant Walsh on his left. The commissioner addressed the room with a prepared statement, outlining the basic facts of the incident and announcing Officer Randall's administrative leave. We take these allegations extremely seriously, he concluded. Racial profiling has no place in our law enforcement agencies. We will conduct a thorough investigation and take appropriate action based on our findings. Sheriff Williams has agreed to answer a few questions. The reporters immediately began shouting questions, but Tanya raised her hand for quiet. One at a time, please, a reporter in the front row stood. Sheriff Williams, can you describe what happened last night from your perspective? Tanya recounted the events clearly and concisely. She was careful not to let anger color her words, but she didn't shy away from naming the problem either. What happened to me last night was a textbook case of racial profiling. I was targeted because of how I look, not because of anything I did. Another reporter called out, Do you think this is an isolated incident or part of a pattern? This is absolutely part of a pattern, Tanya stated firmly. It happens every day to people who don't have a badge to protect them, who don't have witnesses recording, who don't have the platform I have to speak out about it. The difference is that this time, it happened to someone who can do something about it. What do you want to see happen to Officer Randall? Asked a reporter from the back. This isn't about one officer, Tanya replied. This is about a system that needs change. I've proposed several concrete policy reforms to Commissioner Howard and the Police Commission, which we'll be discussing in detail after this press conference. My goal isn't punishment, it's progress. Her measured response seemed to surprise some of the reporters, who were perhaps expecting more calls for Randall's termination. The questions continued for another 15 minutes before the commissioner stepped in to end the session. Thank you all for coming. We will issue updates as the investigation progresses. Sheriff Williams has demonstrated remarkable professionalism throughout this incident, and we are committed to addressing her concerns about our policies and practices. As they exited the press room, Lieutenant Walsh murmured to Tanya, Well handled. You've got the moral high ground and you're using it effectively. Just doing my job, Tanya replied. The real work starts now. Back in the commissioner's office, they were joined by several other high-ranking officials from both departments. The commissioner had arranged an emergency meeting to discuss Tanya's proposed reforms. I've invited County Executive Wilson and Mayor Powell to join us as well, Commissioner Howard explained. They should be here shortly. This has their full attention. Tanya nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. Less than 24 hours had passed since the incident in the parking lot, and already the wheels of change were beginning to turn. It wasn't how she had planned to spend her day, but perhaps it was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Chen at the convenience store. Saw you on TV, so proud of how you're handling this. The cooler can wait. The simple message brought a smile to Tanya's face. In the midst of all this official business, it was a reminder of the real people affected by these issues, the community she had sworn to serve and protect. As the county and city officials filed into the room, Tanya straightened her shoulders and prepared to make her case. The confrontation with Officer Randall had been humiliating and infuriating, but it had also created an opportunity, a chance to transform a personal indignity into institutional change. And she wasn't about to let that opportunity slip away. 3 months had passed since that night in the convenience store parking lot. The summer heat had given way to crisp fall air, and leaves were beginning to turn brilliant shades of orange and red across the county. Tanya stood at the window of her office, watching as officers and deputies mingled in the parking lot below. Today marked the completion of the first joint training session between the county Sheriff's Department and the City Police, a comprehensive 3-day workshop on bias recognition and community policing that every officer in both departments was required to complete. The sight of the two departments interacting casually, sharing coffee and conversation, gave Tanya a sense of cautious optimism. A knock at her door pulled her attention away from the window. Deputy Chief Rodriguez entered with a folder in hand. "The latest stop data reports," he said, placing the folder on her desk. "First full quarter since we implemented the new reporting requirements." Tanya nodded and opened the folder. The statistics were still troubling. Racial disparities hadn't disappeared overnight, but they were trending in the right direction. More importantly, they were now transparent, tracked, and publicly available. "Progress," she said simply. "Small steps." Rodriguez agreed. "But it's happening. The accountability measures are making a difference." The accountability measures were part of a comprehensive reform package that had been implemented following the incident with Officer Randall. Weekly publication of stop and search data broken down by race, gender, and neighborhood. Body cameras always activated during civilian interactions, with footage regularly reviewed. A civilian oversight committee with representatives from diverse communities throughout the county. Mandatory anti-bias training refreshers every 6 months. Getting it all approved hadn't been easy. There had been resistance, budget concerns, logistical challenges. But the video of Tanya's detention had gone viral, reaching far beyond their small county and catching national attention. The public pressure, combined with Tanya's persistent advocacy and Commissioner Howard's surprising support, had pushed the reforms through. "How are things going with the community ride-along program?" Tanya asked. "Better than expected," Rodriguez replied. "We've had over 50 community members participate so far. Their feedback has been valuable. They're seeing the challenges our officers face, and our officers are hearing directly from the community about their concerns." The ride-along program had been one of Tanya's key initiatives, building mutual understanding by having community members, particularly from neighborhoods with historically tense police relations, spend shifts with officers. It worked both ways, giving civilians insight into law enforcement challenges while ensuring officers saw the community as partners rather than potential threats. "And Officer Randall?" she asked.
Any update?
Rodriguez's expression grew more serious. "He completed the additional training requirements last week. Lieutenant Walsh says he's been quietly doing the work, no complaints. He's still on probation, of course, and restricted to desk duty for at least another 3 months." Tanya nodded thoughtfully. Officer Randall's disciplinary process had been thorough but not career-ending. A formal reprimand, 6 months of desk duty, extensive additional training, community service hours, and a 2-week suspension without pay. He had also been required to make a formal apology to Tanya and to complete a detailed reflection on his actions and their implications. Many had called for his termination, especially after the body camera footage was released, showing clearly that there had been no legitimate reason for his suspicion. But Tanya had maintained throughout that firing him would be the easy way out, a quick solution that wouldn't address the deeper issues. "I'd like to speak with him," Tanya decided. "Not today, but soon." "Set something up, would you?" Rodriguez looked surprised but nodded. "Will do, Sheriff." After he left, Tanya turned back to the window. The training participants were dispersing now, heading back to their respective departments. Among them, she spotted Judge Peters, who had become a regular volunteer speaker at their training sessions, sharing historical context about law enforcement and race relations that many younger officers had never learned. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Community Town Hall, 7 p.m. tonight at the Central Library. It would be the third such meeting since the incident, a forum where residents could directly address concerns and questions to both police and sheriff department leadership. The first meeting had been tense with raw emotions and hard questions. The second had been more productive, with concrete suggestions and thoughtful dialogue. She hoped tonight's would continue that trend of progress. The library meeting room was packed by 6:45 p.m. Tanya stood near the back, observing as people found seats and greeted each other. The crowd was diverse in every way: age, race, economic background, exactly what these forums needed to be effective. Commissioner Howard approached her. "Good turnout," he observed. "Better than last time," she agreed. Their working relationship had evolved significantly over the past months. Initially wary of each other, they had found common ground in their commitment to meaningful reform. Howard had surprised many, including Tanya, by becoming one of the most vocal advocates for change within the system. "I saw the quarterly reports," he said. "We're moving in the right direction." Slowly, Tanya emphasized. "We have a long way to go," Howard nodded. "True. But 3 months ago, we didn't even acknowledge there was a problem to solve. That's something." As they prepared to begin the meeting, Tanya noticed a familiar face slipping into the back row. Officer Randall. He wasn't in uniform and he kept his head down, clearly not wanting to draw attention to himself. His presence surprised her. Attendance wasn't required as part of his disciplinary action. The town hall proceeded smoothly, with community members raising concerns ranging from specific incidents to broader policy questions. Lieutenant Walsh handled most of the police department inquiries, while Tanya and Rodriguez represented the sheriff's department. The tone was constructive even when the topics were difficult. Near the end, a young woman stood up. Tanya recognized her as the bystander who had recorded the confrontation in the parking lot 3 months ago. "I just wanted to say that I've noticed a difference in how officers are interacting with people in my neighborhood," she said. "There's more communication, less tension. The community coffee hours at the local shops have been especially good for building relationships. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but it feels like we're being heard now." Her comments sparked murmurs of agreement from several others in the room. Tanya felt a small sense of validation. The changes were making a tangible difference in people's daily experiences. After the meeting concluded, Tanya found herself face-to-face with Officer Randall as the crowd dispersed. They hadn't spoken directly since the night of the incident. "Sheriff Williams," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "I could say the same," she replied. "This wasn't mandatory for you." He looked down briefly, then met her eyes again. "I wanted to listen, to understand better." Tanya studied him for a moment. The arrogance she had seen that night in the parking lot was gone, replaced by something more thoughtful, more humble. "Walk with me?" she suggested, gesturing toward the exit. Outside, the evening air was cool and crisp. They walked silently for a moment before Officer Randall spoke. "I've been trying to understand why I did what I did that night," he said. "The training helped me see patterns I didn't even know I had. Assumptions I was making without realizing it." Tanya let him talk, curious where this was going. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued. "What I did was wrong and I accept the consequences. But I wanted you to know that I'm committed to doing better. This isn't just about keeping my job anymore. It's about being the kind of officer people deserve." Tanya considered his words carefully. "Growth isn't linear, Officer Randall. There will be setbacks, moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves. The question is whether you'll recognize those moments and make different choices." "I'm trying," he said simply. "That's all any of us can do," Tanya replied. "Keep trying, keep learning, keep holding ourselves and each other accountable." They reached the parking lot, their paths diverging. "Thank you," Officer Randall said, "for not pushing to have me fired. You had every right to." "Your value isn't in being a cautionary tale," Tanya told him. "It's in becoming part of the solution. Show your fellow officers that change is possible. That acknowledging mistakes and biases doesn't end a career, it transforms it." As she drove home that night, Tanya reflected on how much had changed in 3 months, and how much remained to be done. The incident that had begun as a humiliating confrontation in a convenience store parking lot had catalyzed real reforms, opened difficult but necessary conversations, and perhaps even transformed a few hearts and minds along the way. Her phone rang through her car speakers. It was Mrs. Chen from the store. "Sheriff Williams, just calling to remind you about the neighborhood watch meeting tomorrow, and to see if you need anything from the store." "I'm staying open late tonight," Tanya smiled. Another unexpected outcome of that night. She and Mrs. Chen had become friends with the store owner, now actively involved in community safety initiatives. "I'm all set, Mrs. Chen, but thank you. I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow." As she pulled into her driveway, Tanya felt a sense of cautious hope. The work of change was slow, often frustrating, and never truly complete. But for the first time in her long career in law enforcement, she could see tangible progress, not just in policies and statistics, but in relationships and mindsets. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes real change was enough.